Hello, welcome to all of our distinguished guests, and especially to the Honorable Anne Bingaman, who we are all here to celebrate today. My name is Taylor Owings, and I serve as one of the Assistant Attorney General Del Rahim's counsel in the front office. And Macon has asked me to welcome you all here today for this joyous occasion, which also marks the closing days of Women's History Month. Now, as our division staff may know, my office in the main Justice Building is poised directly across from the wall of our AAG portraits. And I truly feel lucky to come to work each day, reminded of the incredible legacy of antitrust lawyers who have come before me. For me, working at the Antitrust Division was a goal that actually predated even wanting to be a lawyer. I basically figured out that it was easier to get here through law school than through econ grad school. And that is a hat tip to the tenacity of everyone in EAG, for certain. I really do not exaggerate when I say that it is extremely humbling for me to be gazed upon by the portraits of giants in our field every day. One of the titans on that wall is who we are all here to celebrate today, the first female Assistant Attorney General, Anne K. Bingaman. Her portrait on that wall of AAGs is remarkable in several ways. She is not only the first female in an extremely long line of capable attorneys who came before her, she also provides a pop of color and femininity in her amazing red blazer and floral work dress, and I see that she has complied today with another pop of color.
Some things never change.
There you go. In all seriousness, I think Macon asked me to welcome you here today, not just because I'm the one who sits across from the portraits, but also because I am a young female in the division who has benefited enormously from the legacy of women who have come before me, including AAG Bingaman. This is a field that can be characterized by imposter syndrome. It's also a field that has remained male-dominated far longer than other areas of practice. I think those two features of antitrust law might actually have something to do with one another. Feeling like you fit in when you walk into the room can actually be pretty crucial as an antitrust lawyer. It's funny, I was reflecting on this fact with a room full of incredibly talented colleagues just yesterday at an event that was one of the many events we all have this week associated with the antitrust spring meeting. Talking to this colleague, we looked around the room and each of us reflected to the other that, wow, in this room of incredibly talented lawyers, I feel like such an imposter. What am I doing here? It's true that no matter what you look like, it can feel like you are the only one who doesn't understand the particular field or particular company or particular industry that you find yourself investigating if you're on the government side or if you're getting to know a client's business in the private practice side. It's our job as antitrust lawyers, though, to be upfront about what we don't know. We have to slow down and we have to ask, what would a generalist judge think in a case like this? We have to own the fact that the markets we investigate are complicated and we don't come to them with any preconceived knowledge much of the time. Doing this with authority, asking questions with authority and investigating the field and admitting what you don't know is an incredible skill, and it takes incredible role models who come before you to demonstrate how to exercise that authority in a respectful and inquisitive way. And as a young female, it is an incredibly wonderful gift to have had strong females come before me who can exhibit what it means to be both feminine and act from a position of authority in admitting what you don't know in rooms that are often full of men who are much older and more experienced. So in conclusion, I want to say thank you to Anne for providing a model for how to be a strong woman of authority in this field, and for paving the path on which many amazingly strong women in the division and in the field in general have followed. I truly think about your examples each day when I would otherwise be very intimidated. And for that, I really, truly, from the bottom of my heart, am grateful. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Andrew Finch.
Hi, everyone. thank you for joining us this afternoon to celebrate Anne Bingaman's important contributions to antitrust enforcement and to dedicate this space in her honor. For those of you who don't know me, as Taylor just indicated, I'm not Macon Del Rahim. I can step in for him when he needs me, but I could never come close to filling his shoes. Macon was as excited as I've ever seen him about this event and about honoring Anne's contributions to the Antitrust Division. He had a medical procedure a couple of weeks ago. There were some follow-up things that needed to be done. Unexpectedly, he could not be here today. He sends his regrets, very much wishes he could be here, and asked me to go ahead and deliver his remarks. It is truly special for us at the Antitrust Division to be surrounded by so many people who have made such tremendous contributions to its enforcement mission over the decades. And I particularly want to thank, among others, Judge Diane Wood, who is a deputy, who served with Anne Bingaman, and also Jim Rill, who is a former Assistant Attorney General, who served before Anne Bingaman. I also thought I saw Rick Rule back there somewhere. Rick Rule is here as well, and if there are others who I'm missing, please let me know. I see Bruce McDonald, a former deputy, and Jim Rill. Exactly. So we've got a wide range of people here, and it's wonderful to see all of you. Jim was particularly enthusiastic. He was a predecessor of Anne's, and he really encouraged Macon to do this today. And we, Macon and I, are honored to call so many of you colleagues and friends. It's also a true privilege to dedicate this space in honor of former Assistant Attorney General Anne Bingaman. Anne's career is punctuated by a series of firsts. After graduating from Stanford Law School, Anne was the first woman hired by a major law firm in New Mexico. She was also the first woman to receive tenure as an associate professor at the University of New Mexico Law School. In 1993, President Clinton nominated her, and she was confirmed by the Senate and became the first woman to lead the Antitrust Division as Assistant Attorney General. As we near the end of Women's History Month, it's particularly important to pause and consider how recently it was that Anne broke this barrier. During her confirmation hearing, she described growing up in Arizona and deciding as a 9-year-old that she wanted to pursue a career in law. As she put it, "To me, being a lawyer was like going to the moon. I mean, I didn't know lawyers. It was beyond my imagining." Yet by the time Anne arrived at the Antitrust Division, she had established herself as a tenacious antitrust litigator who took on cartels. Her colleagues still remember her ability to control the room and go head-to-head with CEOs of major corporations. Anne brought that same zeal to her work at the Antitrust Division. Then FTC Chairman Robert Pitofsky commented on her giving new energy to the division's mission. And she made this possible through a series of investments and initiatives that secured additional resources to help it pursue its goals effectively. In 1993, the Antitrust Division, like much of the federal government, was forced to cut expenses. Anne refused to accept that these cuts would mean a slowdown in the division's work, so she launched the division's paralegal unit. This important contribution, stood out to former AAG Bill Baer, who couldn't be here today, but sent a letter to Anne that highlighted the contribution. As he pointed out, Anne saw too much attorney and economist time being spent going through hundreds of boxes that were stacked in the hallways. And Anne knew that there was a more efficient and lower cost way to handle this task. She created the paralegal program, starting with a class of 12 paralegal hires in 1993. The program has grown to almost 100 paralegals today. It's really impossible to imagine the division accomplishing the amount of work it currently undertakes without this group of dedicated, talented, and enthusiastic paralegals. The paralegal program also launched numerous careers, as many paralegals go on to law school, and some even return to the division as lawyers. Another former paralegal, Zach Terwilliger, is currently serving as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. So Anne's decision to launch the paralegal program has not only benefited the division in accomplishing its work more efficiently, but it's touched many people's lives in countless ways. But Anne didn't stop there. She followed the creation of the paralegal unit by convincing Attorney General Reno and Congress that the Antitrust Division needed to increase the number of attorneys and economists as well. In 1994, she received approval to hire 50 attorneys and 6 economists, and we continue to benefit from the service of many of these individuals to this day. In fact, earlier this month, Macon had the opportunity to recognize many of these employees with some of the division's highest honors when we celebrated the Assistant Attorney General Awards in the Great Hall. Anne also made crucial investments in the division's infrastructure. She upgraded the computers to ensure that the division's attorneys were on a level playing field with the major corporations and private law firms. In fact, the picture that Taylor referred to in the entryway in the front office shows Anne sitting next to one of those computers in her bright red blazer.
A wang.
A wang, right. It was also Anne who in the mid-1990s was responsible for the most recent upgrade to the phones in all the Antitrust Division offices. The division has really appreciated those phones. We may not be appreciating them quite as much as we were at the time, but we're looking forward to an upgrade, and it's a real testament to Anne that her investment in our phone system lasted more than 20 years. That and the government procurement process probably had a role to play. Seriously, though, these resource allocation investment issues are not the most glamorous part of the job. Yet Anne approached them with the recognition that they were essential tools for our attorneys to have in order to advocate at the highest levels. Anne put these investments to use almost immediately. Within her first 2 years, the division doubled the number of its merger challenges. The division also went after anti-competitive conduct. In perhaps Anne's most high-profile case, she took control of the Microsoft investigation within months of stepping into the division. Under her watch, the division negotiated a consent decree to resolve Microsoft's anti-competitive conduct in the market for operating systems. While this was a major accomplishment, the events that came next may have had a more lasting impact at the division. As many of you know, all the division's consent decrees must be approved by a federal judge. Anne took the Microsoft decree to the D.C. Circuit and established important precedent that preserved the flexibility of the division in negotiating consent decrees. Without Anne's advocacy on behalf of the division, it could have lost an essential tool in its enforcement toolbox. Anne also reinvigorated the division's criminal program. The division opened an investigation of the global conspiracy to fix the price of lysine during her tenure, and that investigation led to what was, at the time, the largest criminal antitrust fine ever imposed. Additionally, just 2 months after being sworn in as Assistant Attorney General, Anne launched the Leniency Program. This program, which continues to this day, offers the carrot of immunity to the first company that self-reports its involvement in a cartel. It's helped uncover domestic and international conspiracies that have been punished with jail time and over $1 billion in fines for criminal violations. These are just a few of Anne's many accomplishments as Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust. Her career demonstrates a true conviction in the value and importance of sound antitrust enforcement. As Anne explained when she testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee at her confirmation hearing, quote, "It's really the antitrust laws which are at the bedrock of our economic system. They give us the robust competition that encourages innovation, that makes us uniquely American, that makes us really what we are. We believe in head-to-head tough competition on the merits, and we believe that this is what makes America great." I could not agree more. Now I'd like to invite Chief Judge Diane Wood of the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit to share some remarks. Chief Judge Wood established herself as an intellectual force during her distinguished career as a law professor. When Judge Wood joined the University of Chicago Law School in 1981, she was the only woman on the faculty and would later become the first woman to hold a named chair professorship at that school. The division's lucky to count Chief Judge Wood as one of our own, given her service from 93 to 95 as Anne's Deputy Assistant Attorney General for International Policy and Appellate Matters. We're excited to welcome Chief Judge Wood back to the division today to join us in honoring Anne Bingaman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a treat. What a treat for all of us to be here for the purpose of honoring Anne. I think you've already heard some of the words that people who know Anne would stress. One of those words was energy. I can remember meeting Anne for the first time. I thought I was coming to Washington for an interview to see if I might be the right person to be her deputy in those fields. And Anne was 5 steps down the road. I mean, we were planning things. I thought, this is the easiest interview I've ever had. You know, it's just like, will you do it? Yes. Okay, good. Onward and upward. And Anne had that passion, that energy for all of the missions of the division, which, of course, were then and are roughly the same now. You know, the merger enforcement, the civil enforcement for anti-competitive acts, the Section 2 enforcement, the criminal program, everything was just imbued with this sense of purpose and energy. The staff worked with us. We were there enjoying that, and it was just an inspiring time to be there. And boy, if you think Anne takes no for an answer, you don't know Anne. Whether it was getting money for the division, whether it was getting over what everyone else had thought was a big problem, dealing with confidentiality for transactions that spanned different nations. You know, you would go to these OECD meetings, everybody would say, well, you know, we have a file on so-and-so, and you have a file on so-and-so, but we're all subject to confidentiality restrictions. We can't cooperate, you know, wouldn't it be nice? Anne barged right through that. Anne, in the Microsoft case, said, why don't we ask Microsoft if they'll waive confidentiality? Because really, if you're Microsoft, do you want one set of rules that covers Europe and a different set of rules that covers North America, and maybe yet a third set of rules for someplace else? And the answer is clearly no. They were a global company, and so it was Anne's idea, and at Anne's instigation, that we went to Microsoft and said, how about it? You know, can we really cooperate and share documents with the European regulators? And they said yes. And that was a critical step toward reaching the ultimate conclusion we did in what has to be considered round 1 of the Microsoft matters. But the technique was one that has now become, well, it was obvious in some ways. Anne just now said to me about the paralegal program. It was obvious, except it wasn't obvious. It would have been done before. And Anne was the one who said, we need to make ourselves look much more like today's law firms, etc. Now, as you know, and maybe Anne will say a word about this, I'm not sure, she had had experience before she came to the division dealing with the toughest of matters. Those of you who are as old as I am will remember the uranium cartel. And the uranium cartel was one of the places where Anne cut her teeth on dealing with the incentive of companies to hide information, dealing with the practical problems of conducting discovery when people really didn't want you to get those documents, dealing with CEOs of various firms who stood to lose quite a bit of money. She had done all of that before she came to the division, and so really brought that plaintiff's mindset to the division. So many of the things that the division does require that elusive characteristic of judgment. You know, is this case worth pushing, or do we just say, you know, interesting investigation, but we're not going to go any further? Well, Anne brought a tremendous sense of how one should assess cases to the division. And so finally, I want to say something about the fact that it is International Women's Month. So picture this. Every year, the division, at least at the time I was there, perhaps this is still happening, had meetings, discussions, consultations with the Japan Fair Trade Commission. And it would alternate. One year it would be in Washington, the next year it would be in Tokyo. So shortly after I got to the division, it was time for one of the Tokyo meetings. Of course, we have Janet Reno, who is the Attorney General. Janet wouldn't have gone to one of these things, but she was incredibly supportive of everything we did. We had Anne as the head of the division. We had me as the international deputy, and we had Janet Steiger, who was at that time the chair of the Federal Trade Commission. So off we went to Japan, and let's just say I was told by reliable sources that they had to revamp a little bit the entertainment programs. They did it with grace, and we had a lovely time, but it was really funny. The power meetings were in the ladies' room. So Anne has been a pathbreaker in that respect, but one who wasn't asking for anything but just the chance to get out there and fight for the American consumer, to fight for the laws that we all consider so important. It was a huge pleasure for me to serve with her. I think I owe my judgeship to Anne as well. She was an enormous help in that respect, and so thank you, Anne, for everything.
There you go.
And used as I am to these. Well, you know, I made a heck of a mistake. And I regret this. My husband, who I've known for 53 years, we've been married 51 and a half, said to me, I should go to this. I said, Jeff, that's crazy. You shouldn't do this. You know what? He should have. Well, first, I think he would have liked it. Second, I've forgotten most of these things. I really had. As people can tell you, I came to the division once after my resignation for David Tereski's retirement party for about 40 minutes. I went into business. I just figured, I've done that, I know about that, time to try something else. It was a lot of fun, but honestly, I just figured for Jeff, this is so long ago. He was never even the division when I was there. Why should he come to this? I wish I'd recorded it. I haven't done any of those things. I wish I'd recorded it for our grandchild, who's 4 years old, who will never know these things. And honestly, I've forgotten a lot of them. But let me start by thanking first Diane for an amazing introduction. I mean, you'd be amazed if you don't think about something for 20-some years. It just sort of, you know, you move on to whatever else. Jim Merrill, who was a phenomenal role model, helped me a lot. I met with him several times as AAG and before and got his advice. Obviously, my 4 deputies sitting out here, I don't know where to start. I've got Michael Tecklenburg, who is from Charleston, South Carolina. And his father was a dear friend of Fritz Hollings. Now, you guys don't know Fritz Hollings, and that is your huge loss. Fritz was a force of nature, and he was a plaintiff's lawyer par excellence. He could speak like God himself. I mean, he'd get on the Senate floor, and 35 minutes later he'd be talking and nobody would have moved. He was phenomenal. He was so smart. And because Jeff was in the Senate, I knew Fritz. And Fritz's father and Michael's father were good friends. He called me up and said, I've got a great guy. I said, great. Michael Tecklenburg was the best writer in the division. He took every speech I ever gave. He gave me ideas for everything. He gave me political advice. He's in Nancy Pelosi's office right now. The protege of Fritz Hollings, let me tell you, knows a few things about politics. And Fritz Hollings, the reason I mention him, first I'm looking at Michael, but second, when I got to the division and saw our financial problems and the lack of staff and the computers and all the rest of it, I had known Fritz. I didn't know him well. I mean, I had a busy law practice, but I'd see him here and there, and he was a kindred spirit and a wonderfully smart, pro-plaintiff smart person. I got an appointment. I went up to see Fritz, and I took Tom King with me. And you guys, Tom King was our longtime, because Tom knew our budget like much better than I did, and he knew the history of our budget. So Fritz and Tom King and I sat there, and I had a typed list of what we needed, why we needed them. Actually, it was more than a typed list. I took litigation charts. I haven't made this. No, well, I mean, you know, talk is cheap, but people read something, they tend to remember it. And I also had a list of the cases we wanted to bring and investigate. And so first I started with the cases. And Fritz got so into it, it's like, tell me about that case. Tell me what that is. So I'd explain it. We went through them. Then we turned, that took like 30, 40 minutes. Then we turned to the needs and how outmatched we were by huge companies and defense firms on the other side. And Fritz Hollings was the key to the financial success, without which, you know, you're just hamstrung. That's all there is to it. So seeing Michael makes me think of Fritz. He was a force of nature and a brilliant man and a great friend, both to the antitrust division and to the U.S. laws. Second, let me thank Diane, who I had this idea that we wanted to bring international cases because of the uranium cartel cases. I realized this is for real, this isn't a joke, this really goes on. And I just figured we have to have somebody who knows something about that. I mean, I sort of got lucky in these cases, frankly. I hit on keeping documents abroad, Rule 37 sanctions. I found a lawyer, Judge Sirica I figured this is gold. Everybody in this judge was a Democrat and he'll default him, and he did default him. And that was the start of my whole career. But that didn't mean I knew anything about international antitrust. I actually did not. I knew this stuff went on. I knew foreign governments were very complicit in it. They had passed secrecy laws to protect all these cartel documents for their companies. But other than that, I didn't know anything. So Diane brought us a level of expertise, judgment, knowledge of the individuals, knowledge of these foreign competition laws. Chuck Sark and Ed Hand had a lot of that, but they didn't have Diane's background and her professionalism and her deep academic expertise and her profile. And so she made a huge difference. And besides Michael Tecklenburg, I don't know where to start, which end, I can't even alphabetize it. Bob Layton, I'll start with him else first. Bob had been a partner of mine at Powell Goldstein. He has a PhD in economics from Yale, a law degree from Yale. Beyond that, he's so fast you can't keep up with him, but you try and you realize this is good, I need somebody way ahead. And he is also just a phenomenal human being. So I called Bob right away. I said, listen, I need you over here as my chief deputy, principal, whatever they call it. I said, you know econ, which I really don't. You also know antitrust. You got a pro-plaintiff mindset. So he came, and it was phenomenal. It was a great team. Unfortunately, what's her name who stole me away? I forget. Yeah, Alice Revlin. Of course, he knows all these economic types, so he left. He was too good. If it hadn't been for that, he would have stayed. Okay. So, LS, next is Sunshine. Steve Sunshine came to me through Bill Baxter, who had been my antitrust professor. And when I got this job, I realized, okay, I know antitrust litigation, I can do that and so forth. I don't know the antitrust division. I don't know beans about it. I'd actually never walked in the place. I had no background in it. So I listed all the former AAGs, and I hear Rick Rowland's here. I talked to him. He's not in the front. Are you here, Rick? Maybe. Are you? Okay, well, Rick Rule was another AAG I talked to. I'd forgotten that. I knew you were here, but I got so caught up. These people spent like 2.5, 3 hours with me and were on constant call. I took notes, I dictated them up, ideas they had, things they wished had gone differently, ideas they had for me. It was invaluable. And from that, I went to see Bill Baxter. He's the one who recommended Steve to me, because Steve was an associate or young partner, I don't know which, in the firm Bill was with at the time. He'd been our antitrust law professor at Stanford, and luckily I don't remember the grade I got, so I can't tell you. I liked it though, and I generally understood it, but it was second semester of third year, so wasn't too relevant to moving to New Mexico. So, but anyway, Jim Morrell and Rick Rule and Bill Baxter all had great ideas, and from them I came up with things I wanted to try to aim to do. And that was crucial because, you get in there and there are meetings and things come at you, and you gotta have the ability to go outward, to move forward, to have your own agenda, not somebody else's agenda. So Jim was a big part of that. Rick was, Bill Baxter, and the other people that I talked to. So I talked about light and sunshine. Now we come to Turetsky, and I guess I started with Tecklenburg as I was looking at you. This isn't alphabetical, but anyway, Turetsky, I can't remember how you came. Well, I actually don't. Do you remember? I really don't. You do? What'd you do, apply for the job? And I said, great, come on. Well, I tell you why Turetsky was so key. I thought my husband was a pretty good politician. He's not close to Turetsky. He sees around corners politically. He absolutely, politics, I've come to find out, I've never had anything to do with Jeff's political career. It's like a out of left field angle in the whole world. They don't think the same. They see possibilities you don't see. They see real problems you don't see. And it is crucial. And, law and litigation and management, all of that is one thing. The political angle is actually pretty crucial. You have to have the right profile, you have to keep in touch with people, and the Telecom Act, Turetsky did everything on. The FCC relations, he did everything on. State public utility commissions, which we had a big program of cooperating with. Turetsky got all those people in there a couple of times for conferences. They just loved it, coming to the antitrust division. So that was crucial. These people are all very different, as you can see, and actually that's what you need. You need people different from you, people who see things differently than you did, who have different backgrounds. And they were essential, and there were others. I tried to list them all. I did a 33 page thing of what we did. I tried hard to make it complete. I listed all of these people and quite a few more. I could come up with 31. I was ashamed I couldn't remember 70, but I struggled. But it was a phenomenal group. And the division career staff are, I think, what shocked me the most, because the division career staff are truly the creme de la creme of the federal government service. They are brilliant people. They could make a lot of money in all kinds of law firms. They could choose completely different careers, but they don't. They work for relatively small pay compared to the people they're beating in litigation. And they do it because they're dedicated to doing the right thing and to public service. And the division career staff, I think it's widely recognized as the cream of federal service, but it truly is. And there's one division career employee who was here when I was here. Would you speak up? Are you there? I can't see this for my... Okay, well, say your Why don't you come up here and say your names and say it? Why not? Here, I'm going to give you guys the mic, so this is a terrific mic system. Just stand here and say a few words about what you did now.
First, let me congratulate Anne for this recognition. It's well-deserved, and those of us who were here when she arrived remembered the hurricane that came through.
For better or worse.
Personally, Anne and I worked on NASDAQ, and it was an extraordinary experience for us to have someone who was as anxious to move the matter forward as she was and gave us the support that she did. And for that, thank you. And appreciate.
That was my proudest case. I was going to talk about it.
Hi, Ann. I'm Steve Kramer, and I just want to highlight what I think has already been said about how energetic Ann was. There was pretty much total transparency with Ann's decision-making process. She'd have the staffs in at the front office level. I see Craig Conrad back there too, who decided not to come up here. So come on up. Come on. And it was as good as it gets in terms of the staff being fully aware of what concerns were being raised at the highest level in the division, and what points that the highest level wanted to pursue. And that's an invaluable set of information for the staff to have. And it's not always been that way, particularly since at times. So I want to say that I give a little color on Ann's argument before Judge Sporkin, before the Microsoft case went up to the DC Circuit, where Ann decided to inform the judge that he was the judge and she was the prosecutor, and the prosecutor got to decide what the case was that would be brought. And that was quite a scene to have been present at.
The truth, I barely remember it.
I was there.
I was there too, and you're right.
And much amused.
He was waving his pen around.
Right. And Judge Sporker was not used to being told things like that, so it was doubly fun. Things got more mundane. One time, Ann and I, at one of these front office meetings, had a spirited discussion of whether the median was also the average. So things got to that level at times. But the only other point I'll make, lest I get a little carried away here, is we had recommended back in the 90s, under the shadow of Ocean State physicians, that we challenged most favored nation clauses in a variety of settings with health insurance plans. Rick Rule can smile about that too. But at any rate, we developed a case against Delta Dental of Rhode Island, and Joel Klein at the time, based on some work product from Appellate, was disinclined to go forward with the case. We didn't need a meeting on that one. Ann had made clear previously that she wanted to go forward. She happened to be the AAG at that time rather than Joel, and we went forward. And it worked out pretty well. So that's enough.
I remember this stuff.
That's enough going back 23 years ago. I'll leave that. The only other reaction I'll have is hearing Diane say about how they had to rejigger the program with the female attendees. I said to George when I was standing next to him, I don't think they had to do that with Ann. She had a pretty good sense of humor.
To come up here. Is this Craig? No. Where's Craig? You don't look like Craig. So like, where's Craig? There's Craig. I know Craig. Come on up. You don't get to hide here.
Unaccustomed as I am to standing in front of an audience. I've been just taking it in a slightly different way. One of the cases that we brought in Ann's time was a case against a merger of two newspapers. Happened to be in Arkansas, which happened to be the state from which the president came. The acquiring newspaper was represented by the Rose Law Firm. And one of their lawyers would call me up and say she'd like to meet with us because she was coming to meet her good friend in the White House. And that lawyer from the Rose Law Firm called Ann and said, I'd like to meet with you. And Ann said, thought about it, listened, and said, just cancel the meeting. I don't want to deal with those people. And, you know, it was the right thing to do, and I give her a lot of credit for doing it, because just having a meeting would have been an acceptable thing. But she thought about it for a second and decided, you know, the professionalism of law enforcement was a more important message to send, and she sent the right message. So.
I don't remember this either.
Well, it took me a while to come up with it, but look, the energy that Ann brought to the division, and in the form particularly of the paralegal program, has made an enormous difference to the division over many years, and we salute you, Ann.
For all you guys who think this woman is a lightweight, I just asked these people up here to speak, so how smart was that? Anyway, there are just so many people to thank. What I really tried to say in the written papers, you don't have to read it all, but I tried hard to say the work of 300 and some lawyers, plus paralegals, plus incredibly talented deputies. One person is like a fleck of foam on the Pacific Ocean. You're just, if you're lucky, you have some idea what's going on. But I mean, seriously, the division staff and the deputies are who do this, plus Janet Reno, who was phenomenal. There's one case that hasn't been mentioned that I'm actually proudest of, that we did, which is a NASDAQ case. And I was on an airplane in August of '93, and I know this only because it's cited publicly and I found it. I knew it was early, but I couldn't have, and I knew it was Forbes, but I couldn't have told you exact. It was on the back page, you know, this cute little articles on the back, and it was entitled Fun and Games on NASDAQ. So of course I read it. So what this thing says is, the 24 biggest firms on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, you name them, the 24 largest firms were fixing prices of trading one share of stock, which by the way was all electronic, at 25 cents a share. Uniformly, always. And I just thought, this is wild. This is like an all-American price-fixing cartel right out there in plain sight. this is incredible. So we started investigating the case, and we filed a broad-based CID, and amazingly, these guys delivered tapes of their traders. Who knew? They're taping every word any trader says, 8 hours a day with every other trader, and they were a gold mine. So you not only had the statistical huge improbability of 24 firms always trading at a quarter a share, you have these traders' tapes cussing each other out for breaking the spread, as they called it. It was fabulous. It was so much fun. And no, we got a consent decree from all 24 of them in July, and it was only then. I was not going to leave till we got this. We did get it. I announced my resignation 2 months later. And Janet Reno supported us to the hilt. There were people in the division who disagreed with the case. And they wanted to meet Reno and present their view. I said, great, no problem with me. We went up. It took about half an hour. And Reno, having no background in antitrust, no particular knowledge of financial markets per se, she sided with me. We brought the case, and the SEC joined the case after we started. They started their own, and they actually did the rules that transformed the market, although we had the consent decree. A plaintiff's firm, actually I think it was a collection of them. I don't even know if I was aware about the case this time. I might have been, I'm not positive. I didn't hear about it from them. We were already, anyway, they in '99, I think it was a settlement. They went to trial. They got a $1.07 billion cash settlement for consumers. And honestly, if anybody said to me, what'd you do in the antitrust division? I'd say NASDAQ and paralegals. The rest of it mattered, but I mean, I really cared about that. It's like showing the biggest of the big. You can't do this to mom and pops out there who are just trying to make $100 a month. You know, it was just wrong. So anyway, so that was, that was then. I just decided I didn't want to lobby the division. I was sick of litigating. I was going to do something totally different. It was fun. I had a really good time doing it. Okay, I want to thank people who mattered in my life. I thank the people here in the division. Most of you don't know this because I don't talk about it. My grandmother's been dead for, I couldn't even tell you. It's got to be 45 or 50 years, maybe 55. My mother's been dead 36 years. But those two people, my mother and my grandmother, made all the difference in my life. And I'll tell you the story of my grandmother first. She was born in Norman, Oklahoma. Her parents had gone up there for the second run, was on a farm, married a young man, my grandfather, from Missouri. They went to southern Oklahoma. Listen, my mother and her sister, who were 13 months apart, were both born in an oil field tent in Wilson, Oklahoma, outside of Ardmore, because my grandfather was a roustabout on oil wells. It was like 109 years ago, 106 years ago. Anyway, my mother she had a great sense of humor. She'd say, first baby born in Ardmore, first graduating class at Borger High. He went over to the oil fields in northern Texas. They never had any money. They were big-spirited people. My grandfather died at 42 of what was later, my mother later, when she had a heart attack at 45, she realized her father had died of a heart attack. But they thought he died of the fumes in this oil refinery. And this was 1932. People didn't really know about heart attacks. It was so wild that some guy in apparent health would just drop dead at 42. So she sued the oil refinery, had a jury trial, and got $5,000, which may not sound like much, but in 1932 was a fair amount of money. I mean, for people without any money. So she moved with her 5 kids in age 6 to 19 to Cottonwood, Arizona, which is at the foot of the hill, on the top of the hill. Sedona's just north of it, Cottonwood. Jerome is at the top of the hill. Cottonwood's at the foot. She bought a boarding house with that money. She and one other woman cooked breakfast and dinner for 24 people, 18 of them minors, herself and her 6 children, from 32 to 1946. When her sons got out of the Navy and they went to Phoenix and all started a business, and that was successful. Anyway, she was a laugh a minute. She was the life of every party. My favorite story about her, of many I could tell, when my mother's father died and they left northern Texas, the Panhandle, they were driving out to Arizona, about which they knew nothing. They'd never been there. My mother told me this many, many years later. She said they stopped in a friend's of hers house in Belen, which is south of Albuquerque, about 30 miles, which is a nice town right on the Rio Grande River. And this woman lived in the oil fields. And my grandmother wasn't in a hurry, and she was very close to this woman, so they stayed there a couple of weeks. And it was spring, and it was nice. And my mother said one day, she didn't tell me this for many years, her mother and this woman would take long walks along the river and visit. And she said one day her mother and this friend came home in the afternoon, like 2:30 or 3, and all 5 of these kids were sitting on the couch crying. And my grandmother walked in and said, "Children, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" And my mother said, she told it sort of laughing, "Boo-hoo-hoo, Mama, we're sad that Daddy is dead." And she said, my grandmother immediately said, "Children, we'll revere your father forever. We love him. He was a wonderful man. But your father is gone. We have to live for ourselves. Life is for the living. I don't want to hear you kids crying about your father again. You got to move on." Now that's sort of amazing for somebody who's just lost her husband. That was my grandmother. She was like fearless, but very charming at the same time. There was nothing hardcore about her. She just, I think these people who lived on the frontier, they've seen a lot of death. They just sort of accept it. You gotta keep moving. So that was my grandmother. My mother, as her daughter, she had 3 daughters, but my mother was the strongest of the characters, really, of all her children. And I don't know if she got it from her mother. I've sort of come to think personality's inherited, to tell you the truth, but I don't know that. My mother, and I realize there are a lot of Republicans in the crowd. Trust me, I believe in the 2-party system. That didn't happen to be my family. They had lived through the Depression in a hard way. They were FDR Democrats all the way. And so my earliest political memory, at age 5, once in a while, we lived in about an 800 square foot house. My parents had a king size bed, about this much room between their wall and the bed, but they would let one of us sleep with them in the middle. We loved that, my brother and I. He was 3 and I was 5. And by sheer chance, election night of 1948, I didn't know it at the time, I don't remember that, I happened to be sleeping with them. It was only every couple of months, it wasn't remotely routine. Well, my father always went to work at 5:30, got up at 4:45, ate breakfast, drank, went to work. This morning, he came in, leaned over, and said, Ann, get up, Truman's ahead. My mother said, Ann, get up, we gotta listen to the radio, Truman's ahead, come on. We got in the living room. I don't remember it from that, but I guess maybe I knew who Truman was. It was so dramatic. That was my mother. So naturally, growing up around her, I was crazy about Democratic politics as a child. And 2 stories come from that. One, in '52, when Adlai Stevenson was running for president, oh man, I followed it, I read the papers, I was sure he was going to win, he was great. he lost. I was heartbroken. He was my great hero in a way that Truman wasn't. I wasn't old enough to know that much about Truman, but by 9, I really had followed this. I just decided he was a lawyer, I'm going to be a lawyer. Now that sounds insane. My parents hadn't gone to college. I didn't know anyone who had been a lawyer. They didn't know any lawyers. But I think kids are sort of instinctively looking for heroes. And he became my hero. And that's what got me to law school, because I just kept telling people, they'd say, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'd say, I'm going to be a lawyer. Oh, really? Well, that's nice. I mean, it was just so weird. This is the 1950s, you know, little kids. Girls didn't go around saying that. Anyway, so my mother had a huge influence on my current life, the course of my life. Obviously, I met Jeff in law school, and without her, I really seriously doubt that would ever, well, I don't seriously doubt it wouldn't. The percentage of women going to law school in 1965, when I did, I read this many years later, I didn't know it at the time, was 3%, which is what it had been in 1920. I mean, it just was, it exploded like a handful of years after that. But in 1965, it was still, well, Sandra Day O'Connor had gone to law school in the early 50s. It was no different. I don't compare myself to her, but I've been reading a biography of her, and I'm just telling you, it was the same era, which ended right after that. But the point about me is, this weird confluence of events, of Adlai Stevenson, my mother, wanting to be a lawyer, I met Jeff and moved to New Mexico. Okay, I've painted a picture for you, a few lawyers there. When we got to New Mexico, there were 10 practicing women lawyers and a bar of 840. I mean, there were 6 retired women, much older. Of course, I had 20 whatever, thought they were older. They probably were a lot younger than I am now, but there were just no people. And oddly, that is what created my career. My mother and grandmother, and sort of this image that I was going to try to make some of myself, and their personal example, and going to New Mexico. Because the state was so small, people heard about you. It's weird. Diane's going to say, we were in Santa Fe, I worked for the Bureau of Revenue. I was the only lawyer there. The commissioner was this brilliant man. I was sure his firm would hire me when we moved to Albuquerque. I called his partner, former partner, Norm Thayer, and said, Norm, you know, we're going to move to Albuquerque. I'd love to work for, I won't name the firm, but it's still there. And this man said to me, well, Ann, you know, women have very good careers in government. There's Joyce Streeter at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he named some other woman at the Motor Vehicles Department, and, you know, why don't you look into that? I saw this guy about 15 years ago, and he ranked on what happened to me next. So they wouldn't hire me. So I couldn't get in the door of any, of course, there were hardly any people in Albuquerque, New Mexico at this time. This is what you have to understand. I called a friend, Stanford classmate, working at the second biggest firm in the state, 13 lawyers. It was considered a leviathan. And he got me a meeting with the hiring partner. So I go in to see this guy, and I have my little one-page resume, and I have my reference, and blah, blah, blah. And we talk a minute. He said, I'm sorry, we don't have any jobs. We hire one person a year. This was in January. We hired him last September, and we just don't have a job. I said, well, how about a law clerk? Could I be a law clerk for? He said, we don't hire law clerks. And we talked, and then he looked at me and said, but you know what you could do? You could be a paralegal for us. He said, he was a personal injury defense lawyer. He had a lot of insurance company clients. And he said, there is a plaintiff's firm in Kansas that has 24 women as paralegals. And I've been trying to get the partners to hire somebody as a paralegal, but they won't do it because they say women can't be lawyers. But you're a woman and a lawyer. So I think I could get the partners to hire you as a paralegal. I said, I'll take the job. I'll do it for a year, but if I'm not a lawyer in a year, I'm going to quit. I'm not. He said, okay, we understand each other. I said, okay, great. So I go to work. I had a blast with this guy. He became one of my dearest lifelong friends. His name was Joe Rail. I know his son today, and I'm going to speak at a memorial for his dad and tell his story. He taught me to write document requests and interrogatories. I could turn out 100 pages on a fender bender. I mean, people all over New Mexico are saying, my God, who does have Joe Rail have closeted over there turning out this stuff? This is outrageous, but the judges didn't care. And this is so weird, proved to be the key to the United Nuclear case. Because when I got this case, I had been a law professor. I had never been in a court. What do I know about litigation? Zippo. But I sure knew how to write interrogatories and document requests. So that's what I did. And luckily, the Friends of the Earth had stolen like 2 inches of cartel documents from a Canadian cartel member's office. And this was it. Nobody knew anything, but it had minutes of meetings, who came to them, what prices were allocated. Anyway, Joe Rail, plus, so the Modrell firm, plus the next thing that happened from that, so we leave Albuquerque. We couldn't stand it. Santa Fe was so small, Albuquerque. It was too big. We couldn't get to know people. So we go back to Santa Fe. So I'm sitting in the Attorney General's office in Santa Fe, and just happy as a clam I was doing tax litigation because I'd been to Bureau of Revenue, but I got bored of it, so I came to. Anyway, one day the phone rings, October 71. I'm in a little windowless cubicle, smaller than this space. It was fine. It was just fine. I pick up the phone, hello. This voice says, Ann, this is Fred Hart down here. I'm dean at the law school. I said, oh yeah, I know who you are, Fred. I've never been in law school. I had never lived in New Mexico other than this brief time. I'd been there about 2.5 years. I said, what can I do for you? He says, well, I'll tell you why I'm calling. We've got all these women, law students. We now have 18 of them, and they're demanding we hire a woman law professor. So we've been asking around, and everybody says, you're pretty good. Do you want to come apply for the job? I said, sure. When do you want me? He said, how about Monday at 9 o'clock? I said to Joe, you are not going to believe this. I think I'm going to be like I had to kill this guy's wife to not get this job. So that's how I became a law professor. I'm not kidding you. No, I mean, this could never happen today, including in New Mexico. It might happen in Wyoming. But I mean, the world's just too big. And honestly, that's because I taught law 5.5 years. I got tenure. I did all this women's rights. And the legislature was small. I'd been around there a lot for tax things. So it was fun, but it was like, you guys who know me and you're seeing me now, I'm not an intellectual. It was like, at one point I just thought, I've taught 5 or 6 courses. When am I going to teach 25 courses? Why? I just quit. I didn't have a job. So I went to Santa Fe, that's where we live. I opened a one-person law office. Ann K. Bingaman announces the opening of her office for the practice of law. This crazy law firm in Santa Fe has just heard about this uranium cartel. They figure, she's a law professor, she can write some briefs, this will be good. So they hire me. So it's weird. What I'm trying to convey to you is being in small places can actually be a huge advantage, although frankly New Mexico is too big now. I don't know where it's small enough anymore. So what I'm trying to say is my career has infinitely more to do with raw luck. Seriously. This could have happened to tons of people if they had been one of 10 women practicing lawyers in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1969 and 70. So I take no credit. It's my family, it's coincidence and luck, just sheer raw luck. So I thank you for this. I'm sorry I've talked too long, but I wanted to explain to you. What's happened to me is not me. It's more the situation and the times, which probably won't be repeated and wouldn't happen to me today. Not probably, I think it wouldn't. Okay, I thank you all very, very much. Thank you.
So before you all leave, this is the official plaque. It will be also hanging outside. It's identical. And it says, Ann K. Bingaman Auditorium and Lecture Hall, Assistant Attorney General for the Antitrust Division, June 1993 to October 1996. First confirmed woman, Assistant Attorney General, Antitrust Division, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, William P. Barr, U.S. Attorney General, Maycomb Delrahim, Assistant Attorney General, Antitrust Division.
And we do have a ribbon. Lastly, we have a ribbon to cut.
Oh, really?
Ribbons kept falling down. Okay.
Well, it's perfect. Once you guys get closer.
Oh, well, okay.
You can always hold it up.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's see. Okay.
All right. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. It's a wonderful event, wonderful, wonderful stories, fascinating. Thank you, Judge Wood. Thank you for being here. Jim, Rick. Oh, I don't know, all of Ann's deputies come up and take a picture. Okay? And thanks everybody for being here. It's really cool. Thank you very much.